I was 17 years old with $47 in my pocket when my stepfather told me I didn't belong in his house anymore. June 14th, 1973. The date burns in my memory the way a brand burns into flesh. Permanent, unforgiving, impossible to forget. The air that evening smelled like cut grass and approaching rain. County Road 22 stretched in both directions outside Grundy Center, Iowa, endless and indifferent. I stood there with a green trash bag at my feet containing everything I owned in the world. Warren Ashford hadn't raised his voice. That was what made it worse somehow. He'd said it like he was explaining a simple fact, the way you'd tell someone the store was closed or it was going to rain. You're not my daughter. You're 17 now, old enough to be on your own. Get out. My mother stood behind him in the doorway. Vivian, her hands shook at her sides, fingers twisting the fabric of her house dress. She was crying so quietly I could barely hear it. The tears ran down her face in silence, and she didn't wipe them away. She didn't step forward. She didn't say stop or wait or this is my daughter too. She just stood there, her whole body trembling like a leaf about to fall. I turned once before I picked up the trash bag, just once. I looked at her and waited for her to say my name, to say Marlo or Lo or baby, or anything that would mean she still knew who I was. Her lips parted. For a second I thought she might speak. Then Warren's hand moved to her shoulder, and her mouth closed. The door swung shut with a sound that wasn't loud at all. It didn't slam. It just clicked into place, final as a coffin lid. I stood there for a long time. Maybe 5 minutes, maybe 20. Time moved strangely when your entire life had just been reduced to $47 and a bag of clothes. The sun hung low over the fields, turning everything orange and purple. Cornstalks stood in neat rows on either side of the road, not quite tall enough to hide behind, even if I'd wanted to try. The panic came in waves. I'd feel it rising in my chest, hot and tight, making it hard to breathe. Then it would recede, leaving me hollow and numb. I checked my pocket again, even though I knew exactly what was there. 3 20s, 1 5, and 2 1s. $47. I could buy a meal, maybe 2. I couldn't buy a place to sleep. I couldn't buy a future. I picked up the trash bag and started walking. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I couldn't stand in one place anymore. Cars passed every few minutes. Most of them didn't slow down. The drivers glanced at me. A teenage girl with a trash bag on the side of a county road, and looked away. A few slowed just enough to get a good look before speeding up again. Each one that passed made the silence heavier, made the reality sink in deeper. Nobody was coming to save me. Nobody was going to say there'd been a mistake and take me home, because I didn't have a home anymore. The light was fading fast. Soon it would be dark, and I'd be invisible out here. Just another piece of trash blown to the roadside. Then I heard the rattle of an old engine. An old Ford pickup truck slowed and pulled onto the gravel shoulder maybe 20 feet ahead of me. Dust rose around the tires in a cloud that caught the last of the sunset light. The truck was faded blue, the kind of blue that had probably been bright once, but had been beaten down by years of sun and weather. The engine coughed and hummed unevenly. The driver leaned across the bench seat. Through the passenger window, I could see weathered hands gripping the steering wheel, a face lined with age and work. A woman, late 60s maybe, with gray hair pulled back in a bun. She looked at me with eyes that had seen things. Hard things. The kind of eyes that didn't judge too quickly. "Where you headed, honey?" The words came out gentle but practical, not pitying, just asking a simple question that deserved a simple answer. I don't know, ma'am. My voice sounded small and far away. I hated how young I sounded, how scared. You got family somewhere? No, ma'am. She studied me for a long moment. Her eyes took in the trash bag, the dust on my shoes, the way I was trying not to cry. How old are you? 17. You graduate? Last month. Another pause. The engine kept running, that uneven hum filling the silence between us. Somewhere a crow called out, harsh and lonely. You got skills? I swallowed hard. I didn't know how to sell myself. I didn't know what I was worth to anyone anymore. I can cook, clean, mend fences. I'm strong. I learn fast. The woman nodded slowly, like she was adding things up in her head, calculating something I couldn't see. Name's Cordelia Thorne. Folks call me Cora. She jerked her head toward the passenger door. I've got 400 acres that need help. $80 a week, room in the spare cottage. You work hard, you eat. You slack off, you're gone. Deal? My hand was already reaching for the door handle. Yes, ma'am. Thank you. I climbed in, pulling the trash bag onto my lap. The inside of the truck smelled like motor oil and dirt and something that reminded me of my grandmother's house before she died when I was 6. The scent made my throat tight, but I pressed my lips together and stared straight ahead. Cora put the truck in gear and pulled back onto the road. For the first few miles, neither of us spoke. The fields rolled past, darkening as the sun finally dropped below the horizon. The dashboard lights glowed faintly in the growing dark. What's your name, honey? Marlo. Marlo Ashford. Marlo. That's pretty. Your parents name you that? My mother did, after some actress she liked. Cora nodded. Where are they now? I hesitated. The truth felt too raw, too shameful. But lying felt worse. My stepfather kicked me out. My mother didn't stop him. The words hung in the air between us. Cora's jaw tightened, but she didn't say anything for a long moment. When she finally spoke, her voice was harder. How much money you got? $47. Another silence. The truck's headlights cut through the darkness now, illuminating the narrow road ahead. Well, $47 and a place to sleep is better than $47 and a roadside ditch. You'll be okay, Marlo Ashford. We'll figure it out. Something in the way she said it made me believe her. Not because I was naive or desperate, though I was both those things, but because her voice carried the weight of someone who'd figured things out before. Someone who knew what it meant to have nothing and still find a way forward. We drove for another 20 minutes before Cora turned onto a long gravel driveway. In the headlights, I could see fields stretching out on both sides, a large house set back from the road, a massive barn dark against the sky. Equipment stood in silent rows near the barn. Tractors, plows, things I didn't have names for. Cora parked near a small cottage maybe 50 yards from the main house. She climbed out slowly, joints stiff from driving, and I followed with my trash bag. Inside, she flipped a switch. Warm light filled a single room with a bed against one wall, a small table and 2 chairs, a wood stove in the corner. Quilts covered the bed in layers of faded color, blues and greens and yellows that had been washed soft over years. On the wall hung a black and white photograph in a simple frame. A man with kind eyes standing next to a John Deere tractor. That was my George. Died 2 years back. Heart gave out in the barn. Cora's voice was matter-of-fact, but I heard the grief underneath it, the kind that doesn't fade just because time passes. I'm sorry. She waved a hand, dismissive. We had 43 good years. Most people don't get that. But running 400 acres alone at my age isn't easy. That's why you're here. She moved to the door, then paused. Bathrooms in the main house. Knock before you come in mornings. I don't get up as early as I used to. Work starts at 6. I'll show you what needs doing. Questions? No, ma'am. Cora nodded. Get some rest, Marlo. Tomorrow's a long day. When she left, I stood in the middle of that small room and felt the weight of the day finally crash down. I dropped the trash bag and sank onto the bed, pressing my face into those soft quilts. The tears came hot and silent. Then I unpacked 3 pairs of jeans, 5 t-shirts, underwear and socks, a jacket, a pair of worn boots, the notebook I'd kept through high school, full of half-finished thoughts and dreams that seemed stupid now. A photograph of my mother before she married Warren, smiling at the camera like she still believed good things could happen. At the bottom of the bag, tucked into one of the boots, I found a folded piece of paper. My mother's handwriting, shaky and rushed. I'm sorry, Lo. I love you. Here's 20 more. 2 $10 bills fell out when I unfolded the note. I sat there holding them, staring at the paper. She'd known Warren was going to throw me out. She'd known and hadn't stopped it, but she'd hidden $20 in my boot where he wouldn't see it. It was something. Not enough, but something. I added the money to my pocket. $67 now. Still not enough to build a life on, but more than I'd had an hour ago. That first night I didn't sleep much. The bed was comfortable, the quilts warm, but my mind wouldn't stop racing. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Warren's face, heard the door clicking shut. The next morning started before sunrise. Cora showed me how to feed the chickens, where to collect eggs, how to mend fence posts that had worked loose over winter. She taught me to cook breakfast for both of us, bacon and eggs and toast, and coffee so strong it made my eyes water. She was patient but firm. When I did something wrong, she corrected me without making me feel stupid. When I got it right, she nodded and moved on to the next task. The work was hard. My muscles ached in places I didn't know existed. My hands blistered from handling tools and wire. But it was honest work, the kind where you could see what you'd accomplished at the end of the day. At the end of the first week, Cora paid me $80 in cash. I stared at the bills like they were something holy. You earned it. Save it if you're smart. I did. Every week I saved almost everything. $80 became $160, then $240, then $320. I bought nothing I didn't absolutely need. 1 bar of soap when mine ran out. A pair of work gloves when my hands got too torn up. Everything else went into an old coffee can I hid under the bed. The rhythm of farm life became familiar. Wake before dawn, feed chickens, collect eggs, make breakfast, mend fences or clean equipment, or help Cora with whatever needed doing that day. Cook dinner, wash dishes, collapse into bed exhausted. Repeat. 3 months passed. Summer deepened into that heavy Iowa heat that makes the air shimmer and the corn grow tall enough to get lost in. I learned the names of Cora's equipment, which tractor ran smooth and which one sputtered, how to change oil and grease fittings and patch tire tubes. I learned the rhythms of the land, the way the light changed from morning to evening, the sound of rain on the barn roof. By September, I had $960 saved. It felt impossible. 3 months ago, I'd had $47 and nowhere to go. Now I had almost $1,000 and a place to sleep and skills I hadn't known I could learn. Cora had given me more than a job. She'd given me proof that I could do hard things. One Sunday morning in mid-September, I sat at the small table in my cottage with a cup of coffee and the Grundy Register. Cora got the newspaper delivered every week, but rarely read it cover to cover. She'd hand it to me when she was done with the front section. Most of the time, I skimmed through it without much interest. Farm reports, high school football scores, church announcements. But that morning, an advertisement in the classifieds caught my eye. Farmall H tractor for sale. Needs work. $100. Just those few words. No photograph, no details. Just an address and a phone number. I read it 3 times. My heart started beating faster, though I couldn't have explained why. $100. That was more than a week's wages. It was money I'd saved by eating cheap and buying nothing extra. But something about that advertisement wouldn't let go of me. Needs work. I knew how to work. Cora had taught me. I'd spent 3 months learning how machinery fit together, how to coax broken things back to life. I sat there staring at those words until the coffee went cold. My mind kept circling the same questions. Did I dare spend $100 on something that might be junk? What if it couldn't be fixed? But another voice in my head kept whispering, what if you could fix it? What if you could own something? Really own it? That night I barely slept. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, running numbers. $960 minus 100 left $860. That was still more than I'd had on June 14th. The fear kept telling me to play it safe, but the other voice kept getting louder. The next morning at breakfast, I almost told Cora about the advertisement, but something held me back. So I kept quiet and went about my work, feeding chickens and mending fence posts and trying not to think about that tractor. But I couldn't stop thinking about it. That evening, I walked into town. It was 3 miles each way, and by the time I got there, the sun was low. The hardware store had a payphone outside. I stood there for a long time with a dime in my hand, staring at the number I'd written on a scrap of paper. Finally, I dropped the dime in and dialed. The phone rang 4 times. I was about to hang up when someone answered. Yeah. The voice was male, older, rough around the edges. I'm calling about the tractor, the Farmall. A pause. You serious? You want to buy it? I want to look at it first. Another pause, longer this time. Fair enough. You know where Hickory Road is? Yes, sir. 1217. Hickory. Big red barn. Can't miss it. When you coming? Tomorrow afternoon, if that's okay. I'll be here. He hung up without saying goodbye. I stood there holding the receiver, my hand shaking a little. Tomorrow afternoon, I'd go look at a tractor I probably couldn't afford to buy and definitely didn't know how to fix. I'd committed to nothing. I could still change my mind. But I knew I wouldn't. The next day, I asked Cora if I could borrow her truck for a few hours. She handed me the keys without asking questions, though I saw the curiosity in her eyes. I drove to Hickory Road with my heart hammering, following directions to 1217. The barn was visible from the road, weathered red paint peeling in long strips. I pulled into the gravel driveway and killed the engine. Before I could get out, a man emerged from the barn. He was old, 70 at least, with thin shoulders and hands gnarled from decades of farm work. His face was weathered into deep lines, but his eyes were sharp. You the girl who called? Yes, sir. Marlo Ashford. Tom Jenkins. He didn't offer to shake hands, just turned and walked back toward the barn. I followed, my boots crunching on gravel. Inside, the barn smelled like old hay and rust and stale fuel. Dust motes floated in the shafts of light coming through gaps in the walls. And there, sitting in the shadows, was the tractor. It was a Farmall H from 1948, I'd learn later. Red paint faded toward brown, eaten away by rust in patches that spread like disease. The tires were flat, rubber cracked and rotting. The seat was torn, springs poking through. The engine block was so thick with grime it was hard to see the metal underneath. It looked less like a machine and more like something that had been forgotten so long it had stopped expecting anyone to remember. I walked around it slowly. My hand hovered near the metal, but I didn't touch it yet. Tom watched me, arms crossed. Bought it new in '48, ran it for 20 years, used it till '68. Then I got newer equipment. This one just sat. How long since it ran? 5 years, maybe more. Engines seized, won't turn. Tires are shot, fuel system's a mess. It's junk, kid. I looked at him. Why are you selling it for $100? Tom shrugged. Because I don't have the energy to fix it, and I don't want to die with it still sitting here taking up space. I just want it gone. He studied me with those sharp eyes. You really want this? I took a breath. Yes, sir. Tom scratched his jaw. You think you can get it running? I can try. He was quiet for a moment. Then he nodded once. Tell you what. You give me the 100. You can work on it here until you get it running. I got tools you can use. Just don't burn my barn down. My hand went to my pocket where the money waited, folded and worn. $100. 2.5 weeks of wages. Deal. I counted out the bills with fingers that trembled slightly. When Tom took them, something shifted inside me. It felt like stepping off a ledge. Tom folded the money and tucked it into his shirt pocket. There's a workbench and device in the corner. Use what you need. Thank you. He grunted. My daughter would have been about your age. She died when she was 9. Meningitis. The words came out flat, but I heard the grief underneath. I'm sorry. Tom turned toward the barn door. Watching you try to fix this thing. I don't know. It helps, somehow. He left me alone with the tractor. I stood there in the dusty silence, looking at what I'd just bought. Rust and rot and a seized engine. But I reached out and touched the cold metal, and it felt like possibility. I didn't try to start it that first day. Instead, I just looked. Really looked. I walked around it a dozen times, studying how the pieces fit together, where the rust was worst, what might be salvageable. I found a shop rag and wiped away some of the grime on the engine block. Under the dirt, the metal was still solid in places. The sun was setting when I finally left. I drove back to Cora's farm with my mind full of pistons and fuel lines and the smell of old machinery. The next Sunday I went back. I brought a thermos of coffee and a sandwich wrapped in wax paper. Tom was in the barn when I arrived, working on something at his bench. He nodded when he saw me but didn't say anything. I pulled the spark plugs and looked into the cylinders. Dry. Rusty. I tried turning the engine by hand. It didn't budge. Locked solid, just like Tom had said. But I'd seen Cora work on seized engines. Patience was the key. Patience and penetrating oil and gentle force. I bought a bottle of penetrating oil at the hardware store on my way back. It cost $2, but I poured it carefully into each cylinder, letting it soak down into the rust and grime. Then I left it, walked away. Let time do the work that force couldn't. The following Sunday I came back and tried again. Still locked. I added more oil, waited, tried again. Nothing. This became my ritual. Every Sunday I drove to Tom's barn with my coffee and sandwich. I'd work for hours trying to coax that engine back to life. Tap the pistons gently, apply pressure, stop, breathe, try again. It was slow. Boring in the way real work is boring, the kind of boring that makes most people quit. But I didn't quit. I couldn't afford to. After 2 weeks, I felt it. The smallest movement, just a hair's breadth of give in the engine. I froze, afraid I'd imagined it. I tried again, carefully. There it was, a tiny shift. My chest went tight. I sat back on the dusty barn floor and just breathed. Tom came over. That didn't sound like nothing. It's not nothing. It moved. He raised his eyebrows. Well, I'll be. Over the next weeks, I worked the pistons free bit by bit, patient as someone twice my age. I cleaned the fuel system, stripped the lines, flushed what I could. The carburetor came apart on an old tarp. I bought a rebuild kit for $15 and handled each tiny piece like it was made of glass. I scrubbed corrosion with a wire brush until my knuckles were raw. I replaced spark plugs. I overhauled the magneto, taking it apart, studying how it worked, putting it back together. When it didn't work, I took it apart again and tried differently. Tom watched sometimes from his workbench. Other times he left me alone. But I caught him looking at the tractor with different eyes as the weeks passed. By the 5th Sunday, the tires became my focus, flat and cracked and stiff as old leather. I drove to a salvage yard and walked through piles of discarded rubber, found 4 used tires that would fit. $40 for all of them. I loaded them myself, wrestling each one into Cora's truck. Back at Tom's barn, I mounted them one by one. It took hours. My arm shook from the effort. But when I was done, the tractor stood differently. Less like a corpse, more like a machine that might remember how to work. The 6th Sunday, I dealt with the rust. I scraped off loose flakes, sanded where I could, wiped the dust away. Then I painted it. Bought paint and supplies for $58. Harvester red. I primed first, then painted carefully, watching the color bleed back into the metal like blood returning to a limb. Tom came in once while I was painting. He stood in the doorway for a long time without speaking. Looks good. I wiped sweat from my forehead, smearing red paint across my skin. Thanks. You remind me of someone. Who? He shook his head. Nobody. Just reminded me of something I'd forgotten. The 7th Sunday was the Sunday I'd either succeed or prove everyone right about me being foolish. I checked everything again. Fuel line, carburetor, magneto, plugs, oil. I tightened bolts until my fingers cramped. I filled the tank with a small amount of fresh fuel. Then I sat in the torn seat and just held the steering wheel for a moment. The metal was cold against my palms. I thought about Warren's voice telling me I'd never amount to anything. I thought about my mother not saying my name. I thought about County Road 22 at sunset and how empty the world had felt. I reached for the starter and cranked. Nothing. My stomach dropped. I tried again. Still nothing. Heat rose behind my eyes, that old familiar feeling creeping back in. I forced myself to stop, to breathe. Panic makes you miss things. I checked the ignition again. There. A wire was loose, just loose enough to kill everything. I tightened it with hands that shook. Then I sat back down, and this time I didn't rush. I cranked again. The engine turned, coughed once. My heart slammed against my ribs. I cranked again. Another cough. Then a sputter. Then a sound like the tractor clearing its throat after years of silence. Then all at once it caught. The engine roared to life with a rough, uneven rumble that filled the barn and made dust shake loose from the rafters. Smoke puffed out thick at first, then thinning. The whole machine shook like it was remembering how to be alive. I sat there gripping the wheel, and tears ran down my cheeks. I hadn't felt myself start crying, but I couldn't stop. The tractor ran. It ran because I'd refused to let it stay dead. Tom appeared in the doorway. He stood there with his arms crossed, and I saw something in his face I hadn't seen before. Well, I'll be damned. His voice was quiet, almost respectful. I shut the engine down after a minute, afraid to push my luck. Then I started it again, just to prove the first time wasn't a dream. It roared back to life, rough but willing. I let out a breath that sounded like a laugh and a sob mixed together. Tom walked closer. "You did good work, kid. Real good." I wiped my face with the back of my hand. "It runs." He nodded slowly. "Yeah, it does." I looked at the tractor again, at the red paint still tacky in places, at the rust I hadn't gotten to yet, at the smoke still lingering in the air. Something settled inside me. Like a piece of me that had been broken had just clicked back into place. Before I could thank Tom properly, he walked over to his workbench and came back with something in his hand. A key on a worn leather strap. "This was under the seat. Found it when I was cleaning years back. Thought you should have it." I took the key, confused. "What's it for?" "Don't know, but it was hidden there deliberate-like. Might be worth finding out." I turned the key over in my palm. It was old, brass gone dark with age. "Thanks." He waved it off. "You earned it." That evening I drove the tractor back to Cora's farm on a borrowed trailer. The sun was setting, painting the sky the same orange and purple it had been on June 14th. But this time I wasn't standing on County Road 22 with $47 and nowhere to go. This time I was hauling something I'd built with my own hands. When I pulled into Cora's yard and parked, she came out of the house. She walked around the tractor slowly, taking in the fresh paint, the new tires, the fact that it stood ready instead of rotting. She didn't smile big. Cora wasn't the type. But she nodded once, and that nod carried weight. "That's good work, Marlo. Real good. Thank you." "What you going to do with it?" I didn't answer right away. The truth was, I didn't know. But looking at that tractor, I knew it wasn't the end of something. It was the beginning. "I don't know yet, but I'll figure it out." Cora studied me for a moment. Then she reached into her pocket and pulled out an envelope. "This came for you yesterday, from a lawyer's office." My hands went cold. Lawyers meant trouble. But when I opened the envelope, the letter inside wasn't from Warren. It was about a woman named Adelaide Ashford, my grandmother. A grandmother I'd never known existed. I read the letter 3 times before the words made sense. Legal language wrapped around facts that seemed impossible. Adelaide Ashford, deceased, August 12th, 1973. Estate including 80 acres of land, structures thereon, and personal property, to be transferred to sole heir Marlo Adelaide Ashford, granddaughter. Granddaughter. I didn't have a grandmother. I'd never had grandparents except for Vivian's mother, who died when I was 6. Warren's parents wanted nothing to do with us. My father, whoever he was, had never been part of my life. But Adelaide Ashford, the name felt familiar in a way I couldn't place. Ashford was my last name, Warren's last name. Had this woman been his mother? No, The letter said she was my grandmother on my mother's side. The details swam in front of my eyes. Appointment scheduled with attorney Declan Hayes, October 1st at 10 in the morning. Please bring identification and this letter. That was 3 days away. I showed the letter to Cora that evening. She read it slowly, her weathered finger tracing the lines. Adelaide Ashford. I knew her. The words hit me like cold water. You knew her? Lived about 20 miles north of here. Kept to herself mostly after her daughter ran off. That would have been 1955, 56, around then. My mother ran away? Cora's eyes lifted from the letter. Your mother was Vivian? Yes. Then yes. Vivian ran off when she was 16. Adelaide spent years trying to find her. The whole county knew about it. She'd drive to every town within 100 miles, asking if anyone had seen her daughter. Put up flyers, talked to police. Never stopped looking. Something twisted in my chest. Why did Vivian run? Cora handed the letter back. That I don't know, but Adelaide was a good woman, hard-working, fair. If she left you land, you should see it. The lawyer's office sat above the bank in downtown Grundy Center. Declan Hayes turned out to be a man in his mid-40s with wire-rimmed glasses and hands that looked too soft for Iowa. But his handshake was firm, and his eyes were kind. Miss Ashford, thank you for coming. He gestured to a chair across from his desk. The office smelled like old paper and furniture polish. I'm sure this comes as a surprise. I didn't know she existed. Declan nodded, unsurprised. Your grandmother was aware of that. It's why she made certain provisions in her will. She wanted you to understand why. He opened a file folder thick with documents. Inside, I caught glimpses of maps, property deeds, handwritten notes. Adelaide Ashford died on August 12th of this year. Cancer, according to the death certificate. She'd been ill for several months. The word cancer felt wrong somehow. Too simple. She left you 80 acres of land bordering the Jenkins property on Hickory Road. There's a barn, a small equipment shed, and some farming implements. The land hasn't been worked in 2 years. She was too sick. But it's good soil. Property taxes are current through the end of this year. He slid papers across the desk. Title deed, tax records, a survey map showing rectangular fields outlined in red. Why me? Why not my mother? Declan removed his glasses and cleaned them with a handkerchief, buying time to choose his words. Your grandmother hadn't seen or spoken to your mother in 18 years. She didn't know where Vivian was, but she knew about you. She'd been searching for you since you were born. How did she know about me if she couldn't find my mother? Birth records. Your birth was registered in Iowa City. The certificate listed Vivian Ashford as mother. Adelaide found it through her searches. That's how she knew you existed. My hands felt cold. So she knew I was born, but couldn't find me after that? Declan put his glasses back on. Your mother moved frequently, it seems. Different towns, different addresses. Adelaide tried to make contact many times over the years. Letters were sent to every address she could find. They all came back undeliverable or refused. Warren. It had to be Warren. He would have intercepted anything with Adelaide's name on it. Refused delivery. Kept Vivian isolated from her own mother. There's something else. Declan pulled out another document. This one looked official, with a county seal. 3 weeks before she died, Adelaide came to me concerned. She said a developer had been pressuring her to sell the land. Man named Richard Dalton. He wanted the water rights. Apparently there's an aquifer under that property worth significant money. She refused to sell. He got aggressive. How aggressive? Threatening. She filed a complaint with the sheriff, but nothing came of it. Dalton's well connected. 2 weeks later, Adelaide was dead. The way he said it made my skin prickle.
You don't think it was cancer? Declan's face remained carefully neutral.
I think Adelaide was 72 years old and had been healthy her entire life until suddenly she wasn't. I think the timing is interesting. But I'm a lawyer, not a detective. He pushed the deed across the desk with a pen. Sign here and the land is yours. Fair warning, Dalton's already been asking the county about unpaid taxes. It's a lie, but he's trying to create problems. You'll need to be careful. I signed.
My hands shook slightly, but the signature was legible.
Marlo Adelaide Ashford. Welcome to property ownership, Miss Ashford. The keys are in the barn. Adelaide left instructions that you'd know where to find them. The drive to Hickory Road felt surreal. Tom's barn was at 1217. Adelaide's property started at 1243. I'd driven past it a dozen times without knowing it belonged to my family. The driveway was overgrown with weeds.
The barn sat back from the road. Weathered gray wood that had once been painted red.
Fields stretched behind it, fallow and wild with late summer growth. Everything had the look of a place waiting. I parked and walked toward the barn. The door wasn't locked. It swung open with a creak that echoed in the empty space. Inside, the smell was different from Tom's barn. Less motor oil, more dust and time. Light fell through gaps in the walls, illuminating motes that danced in the still air.
And there, in the center of the barn floor, sat a tractor.
A John Deere Model B from the 1940s. Green paint faded but intact. Tires that still held air. It looked like it had been parked carefully, preserved, waiting for someone to come back and start it again. This was different from Tom's Farmall H. That red tractor had been mined through sweat and stubbornness. This green John Deere was Adelaide's, kept running for a granddaughter she'd never met. I approached slowly.
The seat was cracked leather, but not torn through.
The steering wheel showed wear where hands had gripped it for years. The engine looked clean, maintained. I climbed up and sat in the seat. It felt strange, like I was sitting in someone else's life. Then I remembered what Declan had said. The keys are in the barn. You'll know where to find them. And I remembered what Tom had given me. The brass key on the worn leather strap. I pulled it from my pocket and looked around.
The barn was mostly empty.
Some old tools on a workbench, a few wooden crates. Nothing that obviously needed a key. Then I thought about what Tom had said. Found it under the seat, hidden there deliberate-like. I ran my hand under the tractor seat. My fingers found a seam in the metal. I pressed and felt something give. The seat lifted on a hinge I hadn't noticed, revealing a hidden compartment underneath. Inside lay a metal box, fireproof from the look of it, heavy,
with a brass lock that matched the key in my hand.
My heart hammered as I fitted the key into the lock. It turned smoothly. The lid opened. Inside were letters, hundreds of them, bundled with string, organized by year, each bundle labeled in neat handwriting. 1956, 1957, 1958. On and on. I pulled out the first bundle. The envelopes were all the same, plain white, addressed to Marlo Ashford in careful script.
Different addresses on each one, but all in Iowa. And every single envelope was stamped in red ink, "Return to sender." My hands trembled as I opened the first letter. The paper was thin, the ink slightly faded. Dated June 15th, 1956. Dearest Marlo, happy first birthday, my darling girl.
I don't know where your mother has taken you, but I'm searching. I will never stop searching. You were born on June 14th, 1955. And even though I wasn't there to hold you, I thought of you all day. I've written your mother dozens of letters, but they all come back. I don't understand why she's running. I don't understand what I did wrong. But you need to know this. You were never alone. Even when we're apart, even when you don't know I exist, I'm thinking of you. Every single day. All my love, Grandma Adelaide. The words blurred. I wiped my eyes, but more tears came. I opened the second letter, then the third. Then I stopped trying to read them in order and just pulled them out randomly. 1958. You're 3 years old now. I imagine you're talking, running, getting into everything the way children do. I wonder what color your eyes are, if you have your mother's smile. 1962. You're 7. Are you in school? Do you like to read? I saved all your mother's books from when she was young. They're waiting for you. 1967. You're 12 today, almost a teenager. I wonder if you know about me. If Vivienne has told you that you have a grandmother who would give anything to meet you. 1970. You're 15. I saw a girl in town yesterday who looked about your age, and I thought for a moment it might be you. But of course it wasn't. I don't even know what you look like. 1973, June 1st. You're 17 today. I'm writing this from the hospital. They say it's cancer, but I don't believe them. I've never been sick a day in my life until Richard Dalton started coming around. But that doesn't matter now. What matters is this. I'm leaving you everything. The land, the barn, the tractor. There's money hidden too, enough to get started. And these letters. I wanted you to know I never forgot you. I never stopped looking. If you're reading this, then you found your way home. That's all I ever wanted. All my love, Grandma Adelaide. I sat on the barn floor surrounded by years of letters. For this woman I'd never met, who'd spent 18 years searching for me. For all the birthdays she'd missed. For the fact that Warren had kept us apart by sending back every single letter. For the cruel mathematics of timing. Adelaide had died on August 12th, and I'd been thrown out on June 14th. We'd missed each other by 2 months. The sun moved across the sky as I read. I went through every bundle, every year, watched myself grow up through Adelaide's imagination. Saw how her handwriting changed from strong and clear to shaky and uncertain in the final months. The last letter was dated August 8th, 4 days before she died. Marlo, I don't know if you'll ever read this. I'm so tired. The doctors say I don't have long. But I wanted you to have everything. I wanted you to know that somewhere in this world you had family who loved you, who never gave up on you. Please don't be angry at your mother. I don't know why she ran, but I believe she thought she was protecting you from something. People do terrible things out of love sometimes. They made mistakes. I made mistakes too. But you, Marlo, you were never a mistake. You were wanted. You were loved. And now you have land, a place to call home. Use it well, make it yours, and know that I'm proud of you, even though I never got to meet you. Love, Grandma Adelaide. I folded the letter carefully and put it back in its envelope. Then I sat there in the dusty barn with sunlight slanting through the walls and let myself feel the weight of what had been stolen from us. Warren had taken that. He'd kept every letter, moved us around to make sure Adelaide couldn't find us, isolated Vivienne from her own mother. I gathered the letters carefully and put them back in the metal box. There were 247 in total. I'd counted them, one for every birthday, Christmas, and random moment when Adelaide had felt the need to reach out. 14 letters a year for 18 years. All returned. All saved. She'd saved them all. I locked the box and put it back in the hidden compartment. This felt sacred somehow, too precious to leave sitting out. The sun was lower now, painting everything golden. I walked out of the barn and looked at the land. 80 acres. Mine. I walked the property line until my legs ached, tried to see it the way Adelaide must have seen it. Good soil, water underneath, a future waiting to be planted. When I got back to Cora's, it was nearly dark. She was sitting on the porch, a glass of iced tea in her hand. "You find what you were looking for?" I sat down beside her. My throat was tight. "I found letters. 247 of them. My grandmother wrote me for 18 years, and Warren sent every one back." Cora was quiet for a long moment. Then she reached over and squeezed my hand once, firm and brief. "You found her anyway. That's what matters." 2 days later, I was in town buying supplies when a pickup truck pulled up beside me. The driver leaned out, a man in his mid-20s with dark hair and a carpenter's belt around his waist. "You must be Marlowe Ashford." I tensed, wary of strangers who knew my name. "Who's asking?" "Silas Brennan. I do carpentry work around the county. Heard you inherited Adelaide's place." "That barn's going to need some repairs before winter." "I don't have money for repairs." He climbed out of the truck. "Wasn't asking for money. Adelaide helped my family when we needed it. My dad lost his job back in '68. She hired him to work her land that whole season, paid him fair, kept us from losing everything." He pulled a tape measure from his belt. "I'm offering labor. You can pay me when you harvest, or not at all. Either way, that roof needs fixing." Something in his directness appealed to me. No pity, no charity. Just a debt being paid forward. "All right. When can you start?" "Tomorrow if you want." That's how Silas Brennan became part of my life. He showed up the next morning with lumber and tools and spent the day patching holes in the barn roof. I worked alongside him, handing up materials, learning how to fit shingles properly. He didn't talk much while he worked, but when we took a break for water, he asked questions. Where was I from? How had I ended up in Grundy Center? What were my plans for the land? I found myself answering honestly. Maybe because he didn't press. Maybe because working beside someone made talking easier somehow. His sister showed up around noon with sandwiches and lemonade. Iris Brennan was 23, with red hair that caught fire in the sunlight and freckles scattered across her nose like stars. "So you're the one who's got my brother working for free?" She grinned to show she was teasing. I grinned back. He volunteered, because Adelaide helped us when nobody else would. That woman was a saint. The three of us sat in the shade of the barn eating sandwiches and drinking lemonade. Iris talked enough for all of us, filling the silence with stories about the town, about people I didn't know yet but would, about how Adelaide used to come to church every Sunday until she got too sick, how she'd helped half the families in the county at one time or another. "She was looking for you, you know." Iris said it casually, but I felt the words land heavy. Everyone knew. She'd show people your birth certificate, ask if they'd seen you. Described what she thought you'd look like based on your mother. Some people thought she was crazy. Most people just felt bad for her. I learned this week she wrote me 247 letters. My stepfather sent them all back. Iris's expression shifted, hardened. "That's evil."
Yes. We finished eating in silence. Then Silas stood and went back to work. Iris helped me clear debris from around the barn. When she left that evening, she hugged me like we'd known each other for years. "You need anything, you call. We're family now. Adelaide would want us to look after you." Over the next 2 weeks, Silas came every day. The barn roof got patched, then reinforced. He replaced rotted boards in the walls, fixed the door so it hung straight, showed me how to maintain things properly so they'd last. We fell into an easy rhythm, working side by side, talking when it felt natural, comfortable in silence when it didn't. He had a quiet competence that reminded me of Cora. No wasted motion, no wasted words, just steady progress. Iris came by most days too. Brought food, helped with smaller tasks, talked my ear off in the best possible way. She had opinions about everything and wasn't shy about sharing them. Within a week, she'd decided we were sisters, and that was that. "You always wanted a sister?" I asked it one afternoon while we were painting the barn's interior walls. "Nope. Had 2 brothers growing up. Silas is the only one left. Our older brother died in Vietnam. But I always thought if I had a sister, she'd be like you. Stubborn, tough, doesn't take crap from anyone." "I'm not that tough," Iris laughed. "You fixed a tractor by yourself. You're living alone on a farm at 17. You're about as tough as they come." It was the first time someone had described me that way. Tough. It felt strange and good at the same time. One afternoon, while Silas was up on the roof, a black Mercedes pulled into the driveway. The contrast was jarring. Sleek, expensive metal against weathered barn wood and overgrown fields. The kind of car that didn't belong here. A man climbed out, late 50s. Expensive suit despite the heat. Sunglasses that probably cost more than everything I owned. He moved with the confidence of someone used to getting what he wanted. "Miss Ashford?" His voice was smooth, professional, but something underneath made my skin crawl. "Who's asking?" "Richard Dalton." The name from Adelaide's letters. The name Declan Hayes had mentioned. The developer who'd threatened my grandmother. I moved to put the barn between me and his car, positioning myself near the door. "Get off my property." He smiled. Didn't move. "Now, there's no need for hostility. I'm here to make you an offer." "I'm not interested." "You haven't heard it yet. $50,000, cash, for the 80 acres and water rights. That's more than generous for uncleared land. The land has water rights worth $2 million. I'm not stupid." His smile thinned. "Your grandmother was stubborn too. Look where it got her." The threat wasn't subtle. I felt my hands clench into fists. "Are you saying you had something to do with her death?" "I'm saying cancer is a terrible thing. Unexpected. Especially in someone who'd been healthy their whole life until they started refusing reasonable business offers." Silas appeared at the barn door. He didn't say anything, just stood there with the hammer in his hand, eyes fixed on Dalton. Dalton glanced at him, then back to me. "You're young, alone. This is a dangerous world for girls without protection. Accidents happen. Farms are particularly prone to them. Fires, equipment failures, people disappearing and nobody asking questions because they assume you just ran off. The fear tried to take hold, but I pushed it down, turned it into anger instead. Get off my property." Dalton pulled a business card from his pocket and set it on the hood of his car. "When you change your mind, and you will, call me. The offer expires in 1 week. After that, things get complicated." He drove away slowly, deliberately. making sure we understood he wasn't scared, wasn't worried, had all the power. When the Mercedes disappeared, my legs went weak. I sat down hard on the ground. Silas came over and sat beside me. "You okay?" "No." He was quiet for a moment. "That's the man who threatened Adelaide?" "According to the lawyer." "You think he killed her?" "I don't know, but I think he's going to try to kill me if I don't sell." "Then we need to make sure you're not alone. And we need evidence." That evening, Silas called a meeting at his house. Me, Iris, Cora, and Declan Hayes. Apparently, Silas had known him for years. We sat around the kitchen table and I told them everything. The letters, the threats, Dalton's implications about Adelaide's death. Declan took notes in a small leather book. "We need to establish a pattern. Document every interaction with Dalton. Find out if anyone else has been threatened or hurt. Pastor Maeve Sullivan might know something." Iris spoke up. She'd been Adelaide's pastor. If anyone knows the details of her death, it'd be her. Reverend Maeve turned out to be a woman in her 70s with steel gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. We met her at the church the next afternoon. Adelaide came to see me 3 days before she went to the hospital. Maeve sat in a pew, hands folded in her lap. She was scared. Said Dalton had come to her house twice that week. The second time, he got aggressive. Told her she was old, alone, vulnerable. That refusing to sell was dangerous for her health. Did she report it? She tried. Sheriff told her it was just business talk, nothing actionable. But Adelaide knew better. She told me she was going to change her will, make sure the land went to you no matter what happened to her. Did she think Dalton would kill her? Maeve's eyes were steady. She said if she ended up dead suddenly, I should tell people it wasn't natural, that someone needed to check. Did anyone check? No. Death certificate said cancer. Body was cremated 3 days later per Dalton's recommendation to the county. My stomach turned. How could he recommend anything? He wasn't family. Maeve's expression hardened. He told the county there was no next of kin, that Adelaide had requested cremation. Both lies. But by the time anyone knew better, it was done. So there's no way to prove anything. Declan shook his head. Not without exhuming the body, and there is no body. We sat in silence. Outside, birds sang like nothing was wrong. What do we do? Maeve reached over and took my hand. We protect you. We document everything. We wait for Dalton to make a mistake. And we pray. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay in my cottage at Cora's farm staring at the ceiling, thinking about Adelaide alone in her house with Dalton threatening her, thinking about how scared she must have been. I thought about the letters, about 18 years of searching, about dying without ever meeting the granddaughter she'd loved enough to write to every week. The anger burned hotter than the fear. Dalton had taken so much. He wasn't taking anything else. The next morning, I drove Tom's red Farmall to Adelaide's land, hooked up a plow I'd found in the equipment shed, and I started breaking ground. The soil turned dark and rich beneath the blade. Good earth, worth fighting for. Silas showed up around noon with Iris. They brought more tools, more supplies, started working on the equipment shed, making the place functional. Making it mine. By evening, we'd turned over 5 acres. My arms ached, my back screamed, but looking at that fresh-turned earth felt like victory. Dalton's week deadline came and went. I didn't call, didn't sell, just kept working the land, kept preparing, kept building something that was mine. On the 8th day, Silas kissed me. We were in the barn, him showing me how to properly tension a new door hinge.
Our hands touched, reaching for the same tool. We both froze. Then he leaned in and kissed me soft and careful, like I was something precious that might break. When we pulled apart, I whispered, "Is this okay?" He smiled. "Been wanting to do that for 2 weeks." Me too. That night I lay in bed thinking about the strange alchemy of loss and finding. I'd lost my mother, lost the grandmother I never knew, lost the safe invisibility of having nothing worth taking. But I'd found land, found purpose, found Silas and Iris and Cora and a whole network of people who decided I was worth protecting. I'd found the letters that proved I'd been loved all along. And I'd found something harder and more valuable than safety. I'd found the willingness to fight. Dalton had killed Adelaide to get this land. I was certain of it now, even without proof. He'd poisoned her somehow, made it look like cancer, cremated the evidence before anyone could check. But he'd made one mistake. He'd left the letters, left the tractor with its hidden compartment, left a trail of threats that people had witnessed and remembered. He'd underestimated Adelaide's stubbornness, her careful planning, and now he was underestimating me. I fell asleep thinking about spring planting, about fresh-turned earth and seeds that would grow into something worth harvesting, about love that transcends death, and family that chooses you, and broken things that can be fixed if you're willing to do the work. About a grandmother who wrote 247 letters and hid them where someday, somehow, they'd be found. About becoming the kind of woman Adelaide had believed I could be, even without ever meeting me. About being worth the fight. Spring came to Iowa the way it always does. Reluctant, teasing, pulling back into cold just when you thought warmth had arrived for good. I spent March and April preparing Adelaide's land for planting. Silas worked beside me most days, teaching me things Cora hadn't covered. How to read soil moisture by feel. How to set planter depth for soybeans. How to calculate seed rates that wouldn't bankrupt me. We planted 80 acres of soybeans in mid-April when the soil finally warmed enough. I used Adelaide's green John Deere, the engine running smooth after Silas helped me tune it properly. Each pass across the field felt like a promise being kept, like fulfilling something Adelaide had started and couldn't finish. Silas drove the planter while I managed the seed. We worked from dawn until the light failed, then ate cold sandwiches sitting on the tailgate of his truck, too tired to drive back to town for proper meals. "You're good at this," he said it one evening, casual as commenting on weather. But I heard what he meant underneath. I had good teachers. The planter needs someone who understands the rhythm. You've got that. Most people rush it, get impatient. You let the machine set the pace. His hand found mine on the tailgate. Rough palm, calloused fingers, warm despite the evening chill. I kissed him this time. Leaned across the space between us and kissed him hard, tasting dirt and sweat and spring. His other hand came up to cup my face, gentle despite the work-roughened skin. When we broke apart, he rested his forehead against mine. "I love you, Marlo Ashford." The words should have scared me. Instead, they felt inevitable, like soybeans growing when you give them good soil and water and time. "I love you too." We stayed there until full dark, wrapped around each other in the truck bed, watching stars emerge one by one. The fields stretched quiet around us. Our fields, land we were building something on together. By May, the soybeans were up, tiny green shoots pushing through dark earth in neat rows. I walked the fields every morning checking for problems, watched them grow taller each day, reaching for light. Iris came by often, bringing groceries and gossip in equal measure. She got me a job waitressing 3 nights a week at the diner where she worked.
The money helped. $80 from Cora plus tips from the diner meant I could buy fuel and seed and start paying Silas back for lumber and labor.
He refused payment, told me to save it for harvest equipment rental. But I kept a careful ledger anyway. Debts needed acknowledging even when people said forget them. June arrived hot and humid. The soybeans flourished. Everything was going exactly as planned.
Then on June 13th, the night before my 18th birthday,
I woke to the smell of smoke. For a confused moment, I thought I was dreaming. Then I heard the roar. Sat up, saw orange light flickering through my cottage window. The barn, Adelaide's barn, was on fire. I ran outside in bare feet and pajamas. Flames crawled up the walls, consuming wood that had stood for 50 years in minutes. Heat hit me like a physical thing. The roar was deafening. The letters, the metal box.
Everything Adelaide had saved was inside. I started running toward the barn, heard Cora's voice behind me shouting, "No, stop," but my legs kept moving.
The letters were proof. Proof Adelaide had loved me. Proof Warren had stolen that from us. Proof Dalton had threatened her. I couldn't let them burn. Silas appeared from nowhere and grabbed me around the waist. "Marlowe, no!" I fought him, clawed at his arms. "The letters, it's not worth your life." "Yes, it is." I broke free and ran.
Made it 10 feet before he caught me again, harder this time, lifted me off the ground.
I screamed and kicked, but he was stronger, dragging me backward away from the flames. The barn roof collapsed inward with a sound like the world ending. Sparks shot into the night sky. The heat intensified, driving us further back. Silas set me down, but didn't let go. "I'm not losing you. You hear me? I'm not losing you." I sagged against him, watching the barn burn, watching Adelaide's legacy consumed.
The green John Deere would be melted scrap. The letters, ash. Everything proof of Dalton's threats gone. He won. The thought was bitter as poison. Dalton burned the evidence, and now he's won.
Cora appeared with a blanket, wrapped it around my shoulders. "Fire department's coming, sheriff too. They won't find anything. It'll just be an accident. Old barn, electrical problem. No one to blame." My voice sounded dead. The volunteer fire department arrived 15 minutes later.
By then, the barn was nothing but a burning skeleton.
They sprayed water anyway, more to keep it from spreading than to save anything. The sheriff showed up an hour after that. Tom Jenkins came too, drawn by the light visible for miles. He stood beside me watching, his weathered face grim. "This wasn't an accident. No, sir." "Dalton?" "I think so." The sheriff, a man named Porter with a belly that spoke of too many diner meals, walked the perimeter taking notes.
When he came back, his expression was professionally sympathetic and completely useless.
"Looks like the wiring gave out. These old barns, you never know. Lucky nobody was inside." There was accelerant. I could smell it. Porter's eyes flicked to me, then away. "I don't smell anything but wood smoke, miss. Sometimes when you're upset, you imagine. I'm not imagining anything. Someone set this fire." "Now that's a serious accusation. You got proof?" "The proof just burned."
Porter closed his notebook. "I'll file a report, but without evidence of arson, there's nothing to investigate."
He left without promising anything. I knew he wouldn't investigate. Knew Dalton probably had him bought. The fire burned through the night. By dawn, it was just smoking ruins. I walked through what was left with Silas and Tom. The tractor was indeed melted slag. The metal box had survived. Fireproof had been accurate. But when we pried it open, the letters were ash.
Heat had gotten in somehow.
Everything Adelaide had written was gone. I sat in the ashes and couldn't cry. The grief was too big, too crushing. Silas sat beside me. Didn't speak. Just sat. After a while, Tom cleared his throat. I kept copies. I looked up. What? The letters. After you told me about them, I went to the library, copied every single one on their machine. Took me 3 days, but I got them all. Figured they were too important to exist in just one place.
He pulled a manila envelope from inside his jacket. 247 letters. Photocopied, dated, organized. Safe. I took the envelope and pressed it to my chest. Tom had saved them. This old man who'd lost his daughter had saved the letters from the grandmother I'd never met. When I could breathe again, I looked at the ruins, at what Dalton had destroyed. He's going to pay for this. My voice came out steady, cold, final. The fire happened on June 13th. I turned 18 on June 14th. 1 year ago, I'd been kicked out with $67. Now I was legally an adult, owner of 80 acres, and someone had just tried to burn me out. Word spread fast. By mid-morning, people started arriving. Neighbors I'd never met bringing tools and lumber. Farmers who'd known Adelaide bringing equipment and expertise. Reverend Maeve Sullivan organizing everything with practiced efficiency. Cora set up a table with coffee and food. Iris appeared with her entire church group. Silas's father came, a quiet man named Joseph who looked at me and nodded once, like he was acknowledging something important. Adelaide helped us when we needed it. Now we help you. That was all he said. Then he started measuring for a new barn frame. By noon, there were 50 people in Adelaide's yard. High school kids hauling debris, old farmers teaching young ones how to frame walls properly, women bringing meals in casserole dishes and thermoses of cold water. I stood watching, overwhelmed. Reverend Maeve found me standing apart from the activity, put a gentle hand on my shoulder. This is what community means, child. We take care of our own. The barn frame went up over the next 3 days. Not a full barn, that would take weeks, but a solid structure with a roof and walls, a place to store equipment, a statement that we wouldn't be driven off. On the 3rd day, a reporter from the county newspaper showed up, young woman named Sarah Mitchell, who looked about my age. She interviewed me, took photos of the community working together, asked pointed questions about how the fire started. The sheriff called it an accident. You disagree? I looked her straight in the eye. Someone is trying to force me off this land. I won't name names without proof, but this wasn't an accident. The article ran 2 days later, front page. Photo of the community raising barn walls. Headline: County rallies after suspicious fire destroys teen's barn. The article carefully didn't accuse Dalton directly, but it mentioned Adelaide's death, the pressure to sell, the convenient timing. Dalton showed up that afternoon in his black Mercedes, parked at the end of the driveway and waited. When I walked down to meet him, he didn't get out, just rolled down the window. Terrible tragedy, the fire. His voice was smooth as oil. His eyes were cold. You did this. I did nothing. But I notice you're rebuilding. That's expensive. Might be easier to sell. My offer still stands. Get off my land. I'm on the county road, Miss Ashford, public property. But I'll go. Just remember, accidents happen to people who don't know when to quit. Next time you might not be so lucky. He drove away slowly, making sure I understood the threat. That night, Declan Hayes called an emergency meeting. Me, Silas, Iris, Cora, Tom, Reverend Maeve, and 2 new people,
A woman named Maria Torres, who introduced herself as FBI, and a man named Kevin Price from the state fire marshal's office. We heard about your situation. Thought we should talk. Torres was maybe 45, sharp-eyed, with the kind of face that missed nothing. Price was younger, early 30s, carrying a briefcase full of technical equipment. The fire marshal's preliminary report says suspicious origin. Accelerant detected in 3 locations. Professional job designed to look accidental. Price pulled out photos showing burn patterns, explained how the fire had been set strategically to consume evidence while appearing natural. We want to build a case against Richard Dalton, but we need your help. Torres leaned forward, intent. We know he's been pressuring landowners across 3 counties, water rights mostly. Several suspicious deaths, ruled natural causes, but the timing's convenient. We can't prove anything yet, but we're building a pattern. How many deaths? 5 over the past 2 years. All elderly landowners who refused to sell. All sudden illnesses. All cremated quickly before families could request autopsies. Adelaide was one of them. Torres nodded. We believe so. But without the body, we can't prove poisoning. I have something. I pulled out Tom's envelope, the copied letters, explained what they were, how Adelaide had documented Dalton's threats. Torres's eyes lit up. These are dated? In her handwriting? Copies, but yes. The originals burned. But these show she was afraid, that she explicitly named Dalton, that she believed he'd kill her if she didn't sell. This is good. This helps. But we need more. We need him to incriminate himself directly, on record. Price pulled out a small device. We want you to wear a wire. Meet with him. Get him talking about Adelaide, about the fire. If he threatens you or admits anything, we'll have him. Torres met my eyes. I'm asking if you're willing to help us stop him before he kills someone else. I thought about Adelaide, about the other victims, about being 18 years old and probably next on Dalton's list unless I sold or died. Yes, I'll do it. They set it up for 3 days later. I'd call Dalton, tell him I was reconsidering the sale, meet him at Adelaide's property. Torres would wire me, have backup nearby, but out of sight. The waiting was worse than the fear. I worked the new barn during the day, trying to keep busy. Checked the soybeans obsessively. Let Silas hold me at night when anxiety made sleep impossible. You don't have to do this, he said it the night before the meeting. We were lying in the barn loft, tangled in blankets, watching stars through gaps in the new roof. Yes, I do. He killed Adelaide. He'll kill me too if I don't stop him. I'd rather you sold, took the money, stayed alive. I turned to look at him. Would you? If someone killed your father, threatened Iris, tried to burn you out, would you sell and run? Silas was quiet. Then he pulled me closer. Number 1, I'd fight. Then you understand why I have to. The meeting happened on June 28th. I wore the wire taped between my shoulder blades, hidden under a loose flannel shirt. Torres and Price waited in an unmarked van a quarter-mile away. Silas insisted on being visible in the new barn, close enough to help if things went wrong. Dalton arrived at exactly 2 p.m. Got out of his Mercedes wearing a suit, despite the heat. Smiled like we were old friends. Miss Ashford, I'm glad you called. Shows good sense. I haven't agreed to anything. Just want to hear your final offer. Same as before. $50,000 cash. You sign over the land and water rights. Quick closing. No hassles. That's well below market value. The water rights are worthless without infrastructure, without permits, without dealing with county regulations and environmental studies.
I'm offering you a clean exit, a chance to walk away from this mess with money in your pocket. What if I don't want to exit? His smile thinned. Then you're making the same mistake your grandmother made. I kept my voice steady. What mistake was that? Thinking stubbornness is strength. Thinking you can fight me and win. Your grandmother learned different. So will you. Are you threatening me, Mr. Dalton? I'm stating facts. This is dangerous work. Equipment malfunctions. Buildings burn. People get hurt. Or they just disappear. Young girl living alone, no family. Who's going to ask questions if you decide you can't handle it anymore and leave? The wire was getting it all. I needed him to be more specific. Like my grandmother? Did she get hurt? Or did she just disappear? Dalton's eyes hardened, but his voice stayed calm. Your grandmother got sick. Cancer. Tragic, but natural. These things happen to people who stress themselves out fighting battles they can't win. Cancer that appeared right after she refused to sell to you. That's convenient timing. Convenient for whom? She was 72. Old people get sick. Old people die. That's life. And the barn fire? Was that life too? He stepped closer. I could smell his cologne, expensive and cloying. Accidents happen to people who don't know when to quit. Old barns burn. Sometimes there's a second fire. Sometimes it's the house instead of the barn. Sometimes people are inside when it happens. His voice dropped lower, more menacing. You're 18 years old, Miss Ashford. You've got your whole life ahead of you. Don't throw it away over 80 acres of dirt. Take the money, walk away, live. And if I don't? Then you'll end up like Adelaide, dead and buried and forgotten. The land will go to auction. I'll buy it for taxes owed. Either way, I get what I want. You just get to choose if you're alive to spend the money or dead in the ground. The admission was clear, explicit. The wire had captured everything. FBI agents emerged from the tree line before Dalton could leave. Torres stepped forward, badge out, voice hard with authority. Richard Dalton, you're under arrest for arson, attempted murder, and conspiracy to commit murder. You have the right to remain silent. Dalton's face went white. This is entrapment. You can't, we can. And we did. Hands behind your back. Price moved in with handcuffs. Dalton tried to pull away, but two more agents appeared, professional and efficient. They had him secured in seconds. Torres looked at me. You okay? I nodded, though my hands were shaking. Did you get it? Every word. That was a full confession. Combined with the fire marshal's report and the pattern we've been building, we've got him. They led Dalton to an unmarked car. He was shouting now about lawyers and false arrest and how this wouldn't stand. But Torres's face was calm, almost satisfied. This won't be quick. Trial won't start for months. But he's not getting bail. Not with 5 potential murder victims and a clear flight risk. Silas appeared at my side, wrapped his arms around me from behind. You did it. I leaned back against him, watching them drive Dalton away. We did it. The pre-trial process dragged through summer and into fall. Dalton's lawyers fought every piece of evidence. But Torres and Price kept building their case. Found more victims. Found more threats. Found communications between Dalton and people who'd been paid to intimidate landowners. In September, I harvested 80 acres of soybeans. The yield was good, better than expected for first-year ground, 9,000 bushels.
Sold the crop for $34,000. After expenses, I cleared $18,000 profit. I paid back every penny I owed. Paid Silas for lumber and labor, even though he protested. Paid Cora for months of kindness. Paid Tom for copying the letters. With what remained, I bought a used combine. Put a down payment on 40 more acres adjacent to Adelaide's land. Started planning for next year's planting. The trial began in November. I attended every day of testimony. Watched Dalton's lawyers try to tear apart our evidence. Watched Torres and Price rebuild it stronger. They brought in medical examiners who testified about suspicious patterns in the deaths of elderly landowners. Brought in forensic accountants who traced money from fraudulent land acquisitions. Brought in witnesses who'd been threatened by Dalton, people who'd stayed silent out of fear, but were finally willing to talk. And I testified. Told the jury about Adelaide's letters, about 18 years of searching for a granddaughter she'd never met, about a woman who died 2 months before I could find her, about threats and fires, and a man who thought he could take whatever he wanted. In December, while we waited for closing arguments, I carried a small box in my pocket, a ring I'd bought with harvest money. Nothing fancy, but it meant something. One evening in the barn, I pulled Silas aside, showed him the box. "Silas Brennan, will you marry me?" His eyes went wide. Then he grinned. "I was going to ask you that. I beat you to it." He pulled me close. "Then yes, 1,000 times yes." The jury got the case on February 3rd, 1975. They deliberated for 4 hours, came back with guilty verdicts on all counts. First-degree murder for Adelaide Ashford and 3 other landowners. Arson, attempted murder, fraud, conspiracy. The charges kept coming. The judge sentenced him to life without the possibility of parole. I sat in the courtroom as they led Dalton away in handcuffs. He looked smaller now, diminished. No longer the man in the expensive suit and Mercedes, just someone who'd killed for money and lost everything. Outside the courthouse, reporters clustered. I gave a brief statement Declan had helped me prepare. Thanked the FBI. Thanked the community. Thanked Adelaide for fighting, even when it cost her everything. That's all I have to say. I didn't wait for questions, just walked away with Silas's hand in mine. We married in March at Reverend Maeve's church. Small ceremony. Cora stood beside me since Vivienne wasn't there. Tom walked me down the aisle. Iris cried through the whole service. Silas and I moved into a small trailer on Adelaide's property while we saved to build a real house. It wasn't much, just heat and running water and a kitchen. But it was ours. 3 weeks after the wedding, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. "Lo?" "It's Mama." Her voice sounded older, tired, but sober. "Hi, Mama." Silence stretched between us. Years of hurt compressed into phone line static. I saw the news. About the trial. About Adelaide. More silence. Warren died. Car accident, January. He was drunk, drove into a telephone pole. "I'm sorry." "Don't be. I should have left him decades ago. Should have stopped him from keeping you from Adelaide. Should have fought harder." She was crying now. I could hear it. "I was weak, Lo. I let him control everything. Let him send back all those letters. Let him throw you out. I'll never forgive myself." Something in me softened. Vivienne had been trapped too, by fear, by poverty, by a man who controlled through cruelty. "You can come visit, if you want. Meet Silas, see the farm. Really? Really. She came in April, took a bus from Des Moines, where she'd been living since Warren's death, walked slowly up the driveway like she was afraid of being turned away. I met her halfway, hugged her despite the awkwardness, felt her shake with relief. She stayed a week,
Met Silas and Iris and Cora. Saw Adelaide's land. Read the copied letters she should have received 18 years ago. I'm so sorry, baby girl, for all of it.
I know, Mama. It wasn't forgiveness yet, not fully, but it was a start. She moved to Grundy Center that summer, got a job at the library, rented a small apartment, started building a life that didn't include being afraid. And she started being my mother again, slowly, carefully, learning who I'd become without her.
Our first daughter was born in 1981. We named her Adelaide, called her Addie. Our second daughter arrived in 1983, Cordelia, for Cora, called her Delia. We built a house on Adelaide's original 80 acres in 1985. Nothing fancy, just 1,600 square feet, 3 bedrooms, solid walls, and good windows. Paid $48,000 cash. I expanded the farm gradually. Bought Cora's 400 acres when she retired in 1987. She moved into a cottage on the property and became Grandma Cora to my girls. Tom Jenkins died in 1992. I found him in his barn, sitting in an old chair, looking peaceful. At the funeral, I spoke about the man who'd let a desperate girl buy a broken tractor, who'd copied 247 letters to preserve love. By 2000, I owned 800 acres outright and rented 1,200 more. Employed 15 people. Ran a CSA program that fed half the county. I started the Adelaide Ashford Fund for Young Farmers in 2003. Helped kids aging out of foster care get their start. Gave them land to work, equipment to use, mentorship to succeed. But I kept both tractors. Tom's red Farmall H that I'd resurrected with my own hands, and Adelaide's green John Deere that had hidden the letters. Both symbols, both sacred. I maintained them meticulously, started them once a month. June 14th, 2005. My 50th birthday. 20 years married to Silas. 2 daughters grown, the farm thriving, Vivian healthy at 74. We gathered in the barn for a celebration. 3 generations of family, some by blood, most by choice. Addie pulled me aside before the party started, led me to Adelaide's green tractor. Mama, I found something. She'd been cleaning it, getting it ready to display. Had discovered another hidden compartment I'd never known existed. Inside was a small leather journal. Adelaide's handwriting on the first page. For Marlowe, if you're reading this, you found both the letters and the land. You kept fighting. This journal contains the story I never got to tell you in person. About your mother. About why she ran. About the mistakes I made and the love that survived them. Read it when you're ready. Know that I'm proud of you. Always. Love. Adelaide. I sat in the barn surrounded by family and opened the journal. Read about a teenage Vivian, pregnant and terrified. About Adelaide trying to help but pushing too hard. About Warren promising escape and delivering prison. About a mother's desperate search and a daughter's desperate silence. About human failure and divine persistence. About how we break each other and still find ways to heal. I read until the light faded, until Silas came looking for me. What are you thinking? I closed the journal, looked at the tractor that had started everything, at the barn that had burned and been rebuilt, at the land that had survived attempts to steal it.
At the family gathered in golden evening light. I'm thinking about how I started with $47 and a trash bag. How I ended up here. He rested his hands on my shoulders. You earned it. Every acre. Every bit of it. I leaned back against him. No. Adelaide earned it. Tom earned it. Cora earned it. You and Iris and Maeve and everyone who showed up when the barn burned. All I did was refuse to quit. That's not nothing. I watched fireflies begin to blink patterns in the darkening air, Morse code of summer, messages written in light. I used to think broken things stayed broken, that what was lost stayed lost forever. But Adelaide taught me different. Love transcends time and distance and death. Someone can love you before they meet you. You can be found even when you didn't know you were lost. The fireflies blinked on and off, fading and returning, never truly disappearing. And I realized the real inheritance wasn't 80 acres or 247 letters or justice served. It was proof that I mattered. That somewhere in this vast world, someone had thought of me every single day and loved me anyway. That was worth everything. That was worth the fight.